Hey, Diane.
Hey, Joe.
By the way, thanks so much for waking me up. Well, not really waking me up, but texting me at 7 a.m. to talk about our first topic of conversation, which is about women's medication being tested on men. I was a little taken aback and I could not believe it. So how did this call come about?
So I had sent one of those memes to my coffee coven group. This gentleman who mansplains women's health issues. And so a few of my friends have since then sent those memes to other people. And my sister-in-law, I guess, had posted one of the rants on her Facebook wall, and one of her good friends posted this big long research bit about how for a long time there were no women included in health trials, specifically for medications, including medications for women, that they have been for a long time testing on men. And there's certain trains of thoughts about why that has happened up until, was it 97 or 1998? One of those 2 years was when they decided that no, there needs to be a law passed that if you're testing drugs for women, they need to be tested on women.
Yeah.
But until then, there was decades worth of research that was all done on male subjects,
Yes.
including medications for us.
So when you sent me the text, immediately I'm like, what? What the fuck?
Right?
It just seemed like so far-fetched. I couldn't believe that this could actually be true. So I decided to do some research, and you're absolutely right. So based on the research that I've done, apparently in 1977, the US Food and Drug Administration recommended excluding women of childbearing potential from phase one and early phase two drug trials. And
Right.
the definition of childbearing potential was so broadly interpreted, it could actually include women who are, used contraception, were single, had husbands who had undergone vasectomies. So, in other words, they were simply having, I guess, the rationale was they were having, according to this research, was having difficulty recruiting enough women, and there was an actual regulatory recommendation contributing to women's exclusion from early drug research. Now, there's some claims that it had to do with not wanting to put women in harm's way,
Because
protecting
of
us little
thalidomide.
women
Right.
from the tragic formaldehyde,
Thalidomide. Yes.
thalidomide, sorry. Say that again 3 times.
Thalidomide, thalidomide, thalidomide.
Right, right. So for those who don't know what that means, it was a drug that was developed for women to, I believe it was to help them with nausea or pregnancy related and sleeping. And it ended up causing unfortunate birth defects. So it was a bad, I'm not going to call it an accident because it wasn't an accident. It was bad research, bad testing, and it put women at risk. And then the results were birth defects. So the research that I was looking into is saying it was because of the formaldehyde. Did I pronounce it right?
Thalidomide.
Thalidomide.
Yeah.
Formaldehyde is an actual thing. I just can't keep my
It
head straight.
is for embalming. Yeah.
Right, right. Not the embalming fluid,
No,
the
no.
thalidomide. Okay. And you have a comment about that.
Yeah, I call total bullshit on that. I feel like no, that would be a reasonable explanation if there hadn't been any research done before 1977 on women ever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If it was a broadband, oh, let's protect the children, because we hear that a lot from certain types of people,
Yeah.
and it never ends up being about the women. So my call of bullshit on that is that if you really delve deep into why women were excluded from drug trials, It's because it's a couple of things. It's a couple fold. So one of the reasons is that when you're doing blind and double blind studies and things like that on pharmaceuticals, you have to account for variables. And one of our biggest variables as women is hormonal fluctuation, right? So if you're doing a drug trial and you have to account for X plus Y plus Z equals such and such at the end of your trial, it's that more costly to do it if you're actually testing with more variables, right?
Yeah.
So they cheaped out essentially is what they did for a long, long time before thalidomide was ever a thing.
Yeah.
Because there have been drug testing since hundreds of years ago. If you it goes back into like the 17th century, and if you go back into Eastern medicine, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years that they were testing drugs
Yeah.
on people. So to say that it was all about thalidomide in 1977 is fine. That's it is definitely a cautionary tale, and it's good that they learned from that as far
Yeah.
as not doing that. But most of that is bullshit because they haven't been testing drugs on women well before
Yeah.
thalidomide happened.
Yeah.
So I think we do get to call bullshit on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. So when I was doing more research, what you said was exactly what I uncovered as well, that women's bodies introduced biological variables that researchers needed to consider, but they felt like it's sort of the women are complicated.
Yeah.
Women are complicated problem like hormonal cycles, pregnancy, menopause, contraception, and other physiological differences can potentially affect research results. But how do they justify so here's
Huh.
the thing, like,
Yeah.
talk about complicated, like, introduce a male body into the testing on female medication. Isn't that a little bit more complicated? Like, how do you adjust for that variable is what I need to understand.
Oh, I honestly don't know. Well, and that's what stems a lot of the health concerns that we have now that we don't have research on is because this has been the systemic issue for so long, right?
Yeah,
If women's research isn't important enough to spend the money and the time to actually use subjects that are clearly going to be affected by the conditions that you're trying to treat,
yes.
then this is where we've gotten to. This is why people feel like their doctors gaslight them when they go in and have a complaint about this or the fact that it takes sometimes 10 years to diagnose endometriosis. If
Yeah.
those were things that affected men, they would not only be cured, but you'd
Mm,
certainly have a diagnosis within one or two doctor visits. There wouldn't
yeah.
be, you know, so it's frustrating and infuriating. And I think the biggest thing now is that when I got the text from my sister-in-law this morning, we started this conversation. I said, all the women's lib stuff that went on in the 60s and 70s and the women that came before us and fought for the equal rights and the equal pay and the women's lib and all of the things. I feel like this is maybe our talking point for grab your torch and pitchfork and let's storm the Capitol. I really do.
There's
Like
a lot of good reasons to grab your torch and pitchfork, though, right? Whether it's,
There are, but
I
this one really infuriates me, I think, more than any of them. And not just because I'm going through menopause right now and feel like I haven't had any real options as far as treatment goes, because I've gotten through it as you're supposed to, you do your time, all of the things, and I think I'm coming out on the other end. My thing is, my daughters are gonna get to our age, and if this shit is still as backwards and back alley as it is now, I'm going to be even more infuriated. Like, there has to be stuff that can be done between now and when our daughters have to go through this shit. And there's
yeah,
certainly time, and there's shit tons of money out there. So
yeah,
it needs to be brought up, and we need to fight tooth and nail until they actually do the research, get the clinical trials. The other thing that I was talking to you about before we started was that if you look statistically, it's not even just so much that your doctor's an asshole and that's why they're gaslighting you. It's that they
yeah.
truly don't know because the information isn't out there. And the information isn't out there because women's health makes less money.
Yeah, I would say that that is as well shocking.
Disgusting.
it makes less money and it's also more costly, like you said, because of the variables and the complexities of a woman's body and all of the components that make up, the rationale that they've tried to push forward, right? The hormonal variances and the different aspects of the marvel that is a woman's body, like menopause, etc. It's interesting, right? Because if you think about the excuses, it is actually justification for why women's health and women's medications must be tested on women, and that there needs to be
Yeah.
not just a gentle suggestion, but a requirement, a legal requirement. And I think you're right. I think that women do need to push back. So I have a couple of more statistics here that sort of chronologically talks about how this unfolded, right? So back in the
Hmm.
50s, the whole formaldehyde,
Thalidomide.
thalidomide,
Thalidomide. Yes.
thalidomide. It began in the 50s, and
Mhm.
the results from that obviously were tragic, but again it sort of goes it kind of again, the excuse for not doing it is the reason why it must be done. Had
Yeah.
they tested women's medications because more thoroughly, there would have probably been better testing and there would have been a better result in terms of the outcomes. Some of the things that are really interesting is in terms of the timeline. So in 1986, now remember, this is like I graduated in 85. I know you were a few years behind me, but the NIH established a policy encouraging researchers to include women in clinical studies. Encouraging. So it
Yeah.
was like a
It wasn't
gentle
law.
suggestion.
Yeah.
In
Please, just
1990,
please.
yeah. In 1990, a U.S. Government Accountability Office investigated and found problems with how the policy had been communicated and implemented. So apparently, this encouragement probably had problems. Can you imagine why? I don't know why that would have
No,
problems.
can't think of it. Yeah.
They also weren't necessarily analyzing study results to determine whether women and men responded differently. So not only were they not mandated to include women, they were not even looking at the differences of the analysis and this.
Physiology.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
Yeah.
then again in 1990, there was an establishment of the women's health, so research on women's health, the office. And then in 91, Dr. Bernadine Healy became the first woman to lead the NIH. And then
Mm.
in 93, the rules started to change. So it took a couple of years. Congress finally passed the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993, and the law established requirements concerning the inclusion of women and minorities in funded clinical research. They were also expected to design clinical trials in ways that allowed research to examine whether the outcomes differed among groups. So not just men and women, but also those who are in differing groups. And in 93, sort of things started to change. But again, it's still not mandated. And the research in Canada is almost non-existent. When I started to do research, it's all very much US based, hence why I'm spouting US statistics.
Right.
But it's quite shocking, like you said, and the results of this are that women's health has been largely ignored. The medications that have been designed for women are not necessarily designed for women.
No.
And
Some
the
of them are
result,
accidental. Some of them just happen to be made for something, and then when they did actually give it to women, went, "Oh, look, your acne cleared up." You know what I mean? Like a lot of it is just anecdotal,
yeah,
which is ridiculous.
yeah, it's crazy. So this is something that I did not know. I was 0 days old when I found out that women's medication was being tested on men, predominantly men, because we're overly complicated, we're hormonal, we're
And we
too
don't make money.
complex. We don't, yeah, and there's not enough money to actually
Mhm.
fund women's research. So I agree. And it's so recent. Like we're talking about that not that long ago. At least I don't feel it was that long ago. We were in high school and all this shit is going on. And my first child was born in the 90s, and that's when things actually started to change. And here we are in 2026, and I don't think things have materially changed. And women's health and available diagnoses, like you said, are still stalled because of this systemic way that women's health hasn't been properly studied. It's abysmal.
It is abysmal. It's grab your torch and pitchfork time. It's and I say that, and I truly think it's getting to be that time. I was about it was about a year ago the first time that I heard, and only because it was last year, that the very first ever for real female crash test dummy was invented in 2025. 2025. Up until then, they had been using a scaled down male model without accounting for a difference in bone density or center of gravity, or literally, they just made a smaller male crash test dummy for all of this time. And then 2025, they introduced the very first anatomically correct female crash test dummy. So that tells you right there how important women are to certain industries. Because what, women don't drive? We don't make up half the driving population. There was no need for a
Probably
female crash
more.
test dummy. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
So here's some statistics again to scare you. So apparently the adverse drug reaction statistics show that in a peer-reviewed study that women had approximately 1.5 to almost 2 times a greater risk of experiencing an adverse drug reaction than men. I wonder why.
Right? Because our physiology is so different. This is the thing. It's just, yeah, it's it's maddening and infuriating, and I don't know, Jill. I don't know.
Insane. Insane.
It does. It makes me crazy. It makes me even crazier when looking at, because a lot of these things, when you go online yourself, ladies, and do the research and start delving into the timeline of this happened and then this happened and then this happened, so much of it has to do with that really and truly we're not interchangeable with men. We're the same species, but we're certainly vastly different physiologically, and not just because of hormones, but things like blood supply. We have increased blood supply at certain times and decreased at other times, which makes
Yeah.
different levels and all kinds of different physiological markers that obviously would make a difference whether or not you react certain ways to certain medications, depending on what those medications are for.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me for a second that they didn't know, hold on a second. Okay, we'll do the research on men, but it might be a little different for women.
Yeah.
They knew for a long, 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 long time that things were going to be different. They just didn't want to put in the time or the money or the research to do it
Yep.
right.
So here's a scary statistic. The US Government Accountability Office examined 10 prescription drugs that were withdrawn from the US market between 1997 and 2000. So these are drugs that were withdrawn. They found that 8 of the 10 posed greater health risks for women than men, and as a result, many of these drugs were actually withdrawn. For 4 of those drugs, the increased number of adverse events among women may partly have occurred because women were prescribed the medications more frequently than men. So we
Without
have
any research. Yeah,
without
great.
any, exactly.
That's awesome.
Just
That
crazy.
is
It's just
crazy.
crazy. Anyway, so there's a ton of research. I will include that in the episode description, links. I think that it's important for women to advocate for themselves. I think women
Yes.
need to know these statistics. And I think that it's important for women to when they are experiencing problems, and I like this is a common story that so many women have, and you touched on it earlier, that when you go in and you are having a conversation with your doctor and you are being dismissed, passed over, ignored, you need to advocate for yourself. And it isn't because, like you said, the doctor is dismissive, although that is probably the case
Some of them, some, yeah.
in some instances, and you would know better than me because I'm not in the health field and you are, but you need to be an advocate for yourself. And it's interesting because I've never had a problem advocating for myself, including my health and anything else for that matter. But not every woman is
Nope.
comfortable. They don't want to be a bother. They don't want to be a nuisance. They don't want to be seen as that women. But this is your health we're talking about. You need to advocate for yourself and you need to do the research to find out if you are experiencing health issues, then you need to research yourself. Don't just rely upon the doctor and do not accept that dismissive tone if there is something seriously happening. There's been too many stories of women's health who got ignored, who as a result had horrific consequences because of it,
Yeah.
right?
Catastrophic events. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, don't think that your doctor is gaslighting you because they're an asshole. A lot of
No.
times the doctors legit don't have the answer.
Right.
So, and that's no fault of theirs. That's the fault of the medical community that has for years not prioritized women's health.
Yeah.
So if you do research or you find that you want to investigate something and you've gone to your family doctor and he said, oh, you just have anxiety, or oh, you just need to move more and eat less, and whatever gaslighting phrases are the thing of the day.
Yeah.
If there are tests that you've researched that you want, you can be an advocate for yourself. Like you said, go in and demand, this is what I want to be investigated. And if you're not going to help me, I will take other avenues until somebody will.
Yeah.
But it's just unfortunate that it has to come to that, that if you should be able to go to your primary care physician and say, this is my symptoms, this is what's going on, and have them send you for the appropriate investigations until they figure out how best to help you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of times with women's issues, as they call them, you get gaslit. It gets dropped into a category of menopause, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. That if you know that there's something up, then say something.
Yeah.
Get it,
For
get
sure.
it checked.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for texting me at 7 a.m. this morning. I truly appreciate it. It kind of lit a fire. It was a what the fuck moment for me this morning. And I appreciate you bringing that to the attention, to my attention, but also to the audience's attention. So
Yes.
until next time, gigglers.
Grab your torch and pitchfork. Let's ride.
Let's ride. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Giggles and Shit Show. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe on Substack at GigglesnShit.substack.com so you'll never miss an episode. You'll get all our content, podcasts, videos, and newsletter delivered right to your inbox. Join our chat to post your very own shit or hit list. We want to hear about the shit that's driving you crazy or making your week a hit. Come laugh, cry, and keep it real with us and our Gen X community.